Hello, hello. It's Dr. Pamela here, and I am so excited to see you all again this time to talk about the lessons that have been shaping my life in leadership through my 50 state challenge. And for those of you who may be joining for the first time, I just want to share with you briefly what this 50 state challenge is all about. So the 50 state challenge is my completing a half marathon in all 50 states. And let me tell you, when I set this goal a year and a half ago, I didn't quite know where I would be at this time, but certainly I was going to be somewhere in the middle of all of this because the goal is to finish it by the it'll be finishing it by December of 26. And so at this point, wait just a minute. I'm having some problems coming through. Let's see. Okay, hopefully this will keep going. Nevertheless, I'll keep going. So, anyway, with this 50 state challenge, as I started talking with people about it, they were sharing how they were so inspired by what I was doing. And there's so many lessons that I've been learning along the way. And so I started this recording as a way to continue to share those lessons and hopefully inspire others who are also going through their own self-care or health journey. And this can support us all as we are looking to make changes and setting big goals for ourselves along the way. And so with that, last time I talked about just finding the joy when it's really hard to keep going. And this week, I want to just talk about resilience, and having recovery in resilience and how that really sustains you. Because over the past month, I've done 2 weekends of back to back half marathons. And so that wouldn't have been possible really without some type of recovery in between. And then I found ways to have recovery even before and during as well. And so that made all the difference. And it's certainly translatable to everything that we do in our lives and personally as well as professionally. And so I want to just, go deeper with that in talking with you more about this and just sharing, kind of what I saw in this journey. And so the first time that I actually did a back to back weekend, those races couldn't have been more different. And so just think about this in terms of, when there are things that you're doing, day to day, you have some big project at work and, it just turns out a little bit differently than you had expected. And so, just kind of what supports you with continuing on with that. And so I'll share with you, the first weekend I had the bright idea that I'm going to do this big race in Philadelphia, and the race was on a Sunday. And if been to that region, there's just so many nearby states. And because I'm a little bit behind in terms of the number of races where I should be in order to finish in the next, 14 months, I got the bright idea, okay, well, I'll just do 2 in a weekend. And so, with that being said, there was a race that was happening in New Jersey. And the race in New Jersey was a small town. It was their first time doing a race. And so things were set up a little bit differently than, some of the larger races that I've done for sure. And with this race, it was really interesting because they hadn't really set up all of the markers and everything. And so there were some points in the race where, I'm the only one on this road, and I'm wondering, am I really going in the right direction? And we can have a whole episode around that, but that was part of it for sure. And then in the Philadelphia race, of course, it's a well-established race. It's on this course, within this major city. So they have everything clearly marked. And it's just a totally different experience. And so just kind of, with that first one, what do I do when it's, clearly not exactly what I had anticipated, but I still need to finish the race, And so with that, one of the things that came up for me in that race was right when we were getting started, there was a woman that I had started talking to briefly, and we talked about what our intervals were. And, when she said what her interval was, I thought, oh, okay, mine is a little different than that, but, it should work out that, I'll probably end up either finishing before her or shortly thereafter. And so we start the race, and I saw this other woman who said that, she basically didn't have an interval. So she was just kind of, stopping when she felt tired. So I was like, well, I can't run with her. So we started through the race. And the thing that happened was the woman that I thought I would be on pace with ended up getting further ahead of me. And the woman who was just kind of going, at her own pace and stopping whenever, she also was further ahead of me. And, it was just so easy, to be discouraged and to feel like, wow, this is, really hard to do. And, maybe I won't end up finishing or what have you. And, the thing that, just stood out for me so much that I think, is certainly something that speaks to us in business, especially, is that, resilience is really about running your own race. And what I mean by that is just that if I am looking at what other people are doing or trying to keep up with someone else, then it's easy for me to not be able to sustain and to be strengthened and encouraged to keep going, because clearly they were ahead of me. I was, on this road by myself. And it wasn't until, certain points where there were maybe volunteers that I even saw anyone. And so just think about that, in terms of times when, you're working on a project or doing something even with your team and feeling like there are others who are going so much further. And I know as an entrepreneur, I may be speaking to you because, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we can certainly feel that way, that there are others who are so much further ahead of us. And, what is it about us that we're not keeping up? But in, this case, what ended up happening, I'll share with you, is that, for the woman who was kind of working at her own pace, I ended up finishing a little bit ahead of her. The other woman who was doing a different interval, she went, ahead of me. And so, it worked out, just as it should have, in terms of the timing of my intervals and everything else. But the key thing in doing that was, for the next race on the next day, it was about that recovery in between. And what, things were done to really make it possible for me to wake up that next morning, do it all over again, and still be refreshed enough to start my week. And so just kind of the recovery piece, and certainly, keeping in mind that in order to be sustained, it's also about remembering that you're running your own race. And it's not about necessarily trying to keep up with someone else. So that's what I wanted to share there. The other thing I'll share, I mentioned earlier that I had done these 2 weeks. They were a week in between, but there were 2 weeks that I did these back to back races. Because when I set this goal about a year and a half ago, I had planned that I would do 1 or 2 halves a month, and I would be on track to finish in December of 26. But life gets in the way, right? And all of the different things I had planned, some of those didn't happen the way that I thought they were going to happen. And I had actually taken an extended break from running at my doctor's request, and just got off track. And so now I am at 16 races, and I have 34 more to go. So got quite a few. And so that's where these back-to-back weekends came in. But anyway, with the next set that I had done, I was going to a reunion event at Dartmouth in New Hampshire. And it happens that there was a race happening in New Hampshire. And then also there was one in the next state over in Maine. And when I was at this New Hampshire race, it was in a small town, a lot of cars on the road. And, they've done it a number of years, but still, you really had to watch where you were given the cars that were on the road, because they couldn't shut down the roads in this town. And with that, while I'm on this course, I had seen the course, just in print, but I don't think I realized how hilly it was going to be. And I tell you, if I could come up with an AI tool that could recognize these hills up ahead, that would be something to have. But nevertheless, invariably, when I'm really on a good stretch running, that's when a hill is coming up. And so I was doing this race, and, we're in New Hampshire. So there were only a couple of us, people of color, at this race. But there was this woman I'll never forget from Indianapolis named Gigi, who came up behind me and she said, "Good luck, sis." And you just don't know what that did. You just don't know what that did. Because again, I'm running this race. I didn't know that there were going to be so many hills. And I'm, a little bit slow dragging it. And just for her to come up and just say, "Good luck, sis." I mean, that gave me, that sense of community, accountability, that supported me with continuing on that race. And I tell you, the next day when I went to Maine, it turns out I saw her again in Maine. And that was so good in terms of just, knowing that there was someone else, so to speak, who was there, and having that community and accountability during the run. And so, you think about that, just in terms of business and how, even in our professional lives, community and accountability can make such a difference. One of the things that I saw as well that I'll share with you that, really was inspiring in so many ways was when I was on the main course. And this was a beautiful course along the waterfront and just through a wonderful neighborhood, kind of weaving through Portland, Maine. And the way they had the course set up, as you were going through the first half, the marathoners kept going ahead past the halfway mark, and then, of course, came back. I had never, ever seen this before, but, you know, during the races, there are pacers, and these are people who are coming alongside you who help you stay on pace. They help you stay on pace. And the pacers that I usually see are the people who are running, you know, like 2.5, 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours and 40 minutes. Those are the pacers that I usually see. But there was this guy who was the lead runner. He's an elite runner, and he's running the marathon. And it must have been, I think that guy must have finished the marathon in, maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes or something. He was so fast. And for his pacer was this beautiful black limousine SUV, and it had a digital display on the back recording the time. And I had just never seen anything like it, because this guy is so fast, there isn't another human that's going to run with him, but it was a vehicle that was ahead of him that was recording his time as he was running. And I just thought, wow. And that was just, just so inspiring. And, I think about that, as a business owner, there are, people in the business world, and other entrepreneurs and founders, who are doing things that you're just, amazed by what they're accomplishing in their business. And it's an inspiration. And, those are the kinds of things also, seeing that and having that inspiration is also something that keeps us going in terms of, our resilience. And so that just really, really spoke to me in so many ways. And so I thought I'd share that with you because it also came out of these back-to-back half marathon weekends. So I want to just kind of in closing, just, leave something with you in terms of just kind of thinking about, how this translates. And so, with running, you really can't perform without recovery. And it's the same way in terms of our lives professionally and, in our leadership, in that, leadership is sustained through recovery. It's through recovery and reflection. And I just, have been thinking a lot, about that in terms of, just the things that I'm doing in my own work. And I know that some of you may have projects you're working on and sometimes may feel like you don't even have the downtime to, take a break, to recover or to have that time to reflect. But that's where the strength is in terms of really being able to sustain in your performance is through that recovery and reflection. I think about that even with a conference that I went to recently, the National Black MBA conference that was held in Houston. And I took, tons of notes, when I was there, but the real value came in with going back through those notes a few days afterwards to really, reflect on what I learned, reflect on who were the people that I wanted to follow up with later. That's where, we can really build in that resilience, build in that, performance up leveling is through that recovery and reflection. The other thing that I'll say is, just around how, in running, support is what, really helped me in terms of being able to continue that race. And it was through that community with Gigi, with her just even coming up behind me to say, hey, good luck, sis. And then seeing her again in Maine and how that really made a difference. It's the same way in terms of our roles in leadership, in life, where community and accountability can be what sustains us and keeps us going. And so I really, hope, I know that that's going to touch somebody who is watching this even in real time or watching the replay, just in terms of just kind of thinking about those and reflecting on them. But, in closing, what I do want to do is just, give you this to think about, this question to ponder. And that's, what's one thing you could do this week to give yourself space to recover? Space to recover. And, that space to recover could look a lot like just time to reflect. There's so much healing and recovery that comes through pausing to reflect. And so I really want you to, think about that. Just think about that. Okay. So, just as this, just as I couldn't, complete these races, without fueling, without recovery or community. This journey is, also strengthened by partnerships. And so if you or someone is interested in partnering to inspire resilience across America, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you so very much for that. And one of the things I will say as well is that, resilience just doesn't happen when you keep going and keep pushing and working hard. It's really about learning how to recover. And that's the last thought I do want to leave with you. Next time, I look forward to seeing you again, and it's going to be talking about why preparation beats motivation. So I want to thank you for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take